Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Coach's Couch. I am your fellow couch sitter, Julie Parker, and the host of Inspired Coach Podcast. It's wonderful to be here with you. I love these episodes. This is only the second one, but I am already loving them so much and feel incredibly close and connected every time I am in this space with all of you who are listening. A big wave and hello out there to all of you, and also the people who are asking questions as well, which is really exciting. And if you have a question for me that you would love to submit, you absolutely can do that. And so don't hesitate. I'd love to be able to answer your question if you have one. So we have another question today, and it comes from the wonderful coach, Catherine Lenhart. You can find Catherine on Instagram at Catherine, that's with a C, Sean Lenhart, Catherine Sean Lenhart on Instagram. And Catherine's website is catherineshawnlenhart.com. Catherine, thank you so much for this question, which has taken me on a journey down memory lane. This is Catherine's question. What is the most powerful piece of advice you were ever given as a coach? What shifted and how did you adjust your sails when this was shared with you? Wow. So when I say a trip down memory lane, I really mean this with this question, Catherine. And I thank you for asking it and prompting me to share. So thank you for asking it of me. And I hope that my answer and a part of my personal journey is going to be something that is really helpful to you in asking it and everyone listening as well. So the first thing that I want to say is that this piece of advice that I was given did not come from a fellow coach. And in fact, it didn't come from somebody that owned their own business at all. It came from a friend of mine, and she doesn't have a business of her own. She works in a creative industry for a private company, but it was advice from a friend. And when I think about, I've received lots of wonderful tips, advice, suggestions from coaches and online business owners, but this advice, well, really, it was kind of like a bit of a love slap in a way. It was fairly direct advice. It was a call to action, if I'm being really honest, is the one that stands out the most to me in my now almost 2 decades of coaching. And it came very early in my coaching career. So this friend gave me this piece of advice wrapped up in some pretty direct and heart-searing questions, quite pointed questions at the time, actually. And we're still friends all these years later, so that's a good thing to know. When my website, my very, very first website, had been live for about 3 to 3.5 months. And almost 20 years ago, just to give you some context here, getting a website online was a very, very different experience to what it is now. There was no such thing as DIY unless you happened to be a coding, web, and tech expert. And I really did not know anybody that was those things unless they actually were making a living from being a coder and a web developer and were a tech online expert in that field. There was no such thing as website templates. There was no such thing as DIY. If you wanted to get a website online, you had to pay someone to design and develop that website for you. And more often than not, they were then completely in control of that website, right down to even the smallest changes or adjustments to an image or copy. Thank goodness that that is not the case anymore. And there are now so many incredible options for us all to DIY our websites, or even if we get someone else to design and develop it for us, or even just develop it for us, that we can be in control of making changes to it as we go along. Yes, it was expensive. Yes, it was time consuming. And I'm so glad for all of us now that that is not nearly the case today, and we can have more control over these things. And so this piece of advice from this friend, and she rang me out of the blue, came about 3 to 3.5 months after my website was live. And she rang me one day and she said, "Hey, Jules, I'm touching base. How's the coaching thing going?" And I had no reason to be dishonest with her at the time. And I said, "Well, actually, it's kind of not going the way that I thought that it would. Since I got my website live, and I've been working with pro bono clients, I've had a couple of paying clients, I really thought that the website was going to help me attract so many more paying clients, and that really my business was going to expand and grow so significantly from here, or at least start to develop some kind of, more momentum. And it's kind of not happening." And she came back instantly. She shot back at me with so much love, but still very, very direct. She said, "Well, I'm not surprised by that at all." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And I was thinking to myself, that's not terribly supportive of your friend who's starting this business and all that sort of stuff. And she said, "So let me just wrap you in a big energetic hug," down the line of the phone at the time, back when we had long phone conversations with people before we chatted online or via text messages or voice note apps. She said, "The fact of the matter is," she said, "I think your website is terrible." Cue shock from me again, because I actually thought that it looked pretty professional and pretty okay. And this was coming from somebody that worked in the creative industries. And so I was really gobsmacked by this. And she said, "Look, on the surface, it's fine, Julie." She said, It's clean, it's clear, it explains what you do, all of that sort of stuff. But she said, when I look at it and I think about my friend of, 15 plus years now, because I've known this friend since we were in our late teens. We met when we were at university together. She said, "I see nothing of you. Absolutely nothing." Sure, she said, "There's photographs of you there." But she said, "They're stiff. They're corporate looking. It's very beige. It's very navy. It's very neutral. It's very," and then she said the word sterile. She said, it just looks very sterile and not like the Julie that I know." And I was in a little bit of shock. I was like, really? And looking back and thinking about my reaction now, I actually can't believe that that was the reaction that I had, because it seemed so obvious. And it is obvious to me now, all of these years later, but I needed somebody else to point it out to me, to show me something that I clearly could not see myself. And, there's probably a little bit of a coach in her in that way, because I think that's often something that a great coach can do for people as well. And that is help them to see things see things in other people that they might not be able to see themselves. And then she started to come in with a little bit more love. And she said, the Julie I know is warm and feminine and fun and emotive and engaging. And she said, you love pink and soft colors. And she said, it's just not there. She said, and what this is adding up to, Jules, is that it's not you. She said, that website and that brand is not you. She said, so what's happened? She said, how has this happened that there is this incredibly prominent representation of what is meant to be you out in the world, and I can just see, as somebody that knows you like I do, she said, and I know that you're a really good coach and I know how much you can help people. She said, and none of that is there. And then it just started to really dawn on me as we continued this conversation that I had just fallen into a place, a trap really, of thinking that for people to take me seriously as a coach, that I needed to be very serious and I needed to be very corporate and I needed to be very professional, in inverted commas, and I needed to give off this vibe and this aura of what I believed that a coach was and in inverted commas should be. And this was back at a time when coaching was still very heavily influenced by the corporate world. Coaching has its origins in the corporate world. It has since expanded into many, many different portals and fields and areas, thank goodness, since then. But almost 20 years ago, that was very much the zone that was in. But I was working chiefly with women who were not in the corporate space at all, but in fact were wanting to improve their confidence and their body image and their self-esteem and their self-belief. And I just realized, as she was asking me these questions, sharing this information with me, that I had gotten swept up in a false belief that I had to look and be a certain way to be successful. And I needed to toe the line, follow along, play the game, so to speak, and just do what I thought was what people wanted or what was going to help people to take me seriously. And it was this conversation and this core piece of advice that she gave me within that conversation, which was, you need to stop trying to be something that you are not and embrace who you are and believe in yourself enough that you will show to the world the real you and who you are as a human being first, and then the coach that you are as well and want to be and how you want to help people. She said, I just believe that so strongly. And she said, I believe that's why you're not having the success and getting the traction and interest that you want. She said, how can you? Because it's not an authentic and genuine representation of who you are. And I knew that she was right. As much as it was so hard for me to hear, having spent all of this money and invested all of this time and energy into developing this brand and website, I knew that she was right and I had to make a change. And initially, the truth is I was quite resistant, and I came up with lots of different excuses. So this is where we move into the part, Catherine, talking about how did I change my sales. Well, first of all, I didn't want to touch my sales. I went into, even though I knew she was right, I went into a mode of, no, I'm sure I can make this work. I'll just get the web developer to make a few tweaks, whatever. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. But deep in my heart, I knew that it wasn't going to be fine. She was 100% correct. And I needed to swallow the fact that I had put myself out in the world, not with malicious intent or anything like that, but in a way that was not genuine and fully authentic, because I was afraid to fully be that, and thought that people would not take me seriously and that it would not work, and that I was really going against the grain and doing something completely different to anything that I was seeing out there. And so I did have to make some significant changes. I got a new designer, a new graphic designer, and I said, okay, I love pink. I've got a pretty feminine energy. I want it to be soft, beautiful, lush, lovely. And she went, oh, she said, so very, very different to what I'm seeing online right now. I went, yeah, very different. And I also knew that I had to get new photos taken. And I found a wonderful photographer. I want to give a shout out to that photographer, actually. That photographer's name is Fee Mims. And Fee was not the first person that I ever had a photo shoot with. She was the second, but really she feels like she was the first for me, because at that photo shoot, I turned up wearing my kind of clothes rather than the more corporate, navy jacket that I had on. My friend laughed at me and she said, Julie, she said, you look like a real estate agent in that photo, in those photos on that website. She said, you look like a real estate agent. If you're laughing right now, it's okay. I promise you it's all right. You can laugh at me, because she was right. And I found Fee, I contacted her and I said, so I kind of want to turn up and wear a floral dress and, a soft blouse, and I want to be outside and in a garden and flowers and things like that, which I love. And she went, yeah, let's do it. Let's do that. And she took beautiful photographs of me, and she's now photographed me many times since then. She's not the only photographer that I've ever worked with since that time, but she's taken many photos, and she's also taken many, many photos at the Beautiful You Coaching Academy events as well. And that experience with Fee was also life and business changing for me as well, because I realized that I could have my photo taken and project my image to the world in a way that was soft and feminine and fun, and really, really felt emotively connected and like me. And she really helped me to do that. And so the result of this is that I completely changed my brand and the photographs and got the website redone. The cost at the time felt a little heartbreaking to me, but boy, was it a lesson in both life and business that I've never, ever had to learn again. And that is that you should never, ever turn up anywhere trying to be or thinking you should be anything other than who you truly are. And that was the advice that essentially she gave me, and I then needed to act upon. And the outcome, well, this is probably the thing that you might be waiting with bated breath about. The outcome, I'm here to let you know, was almost instant. I started to notice clear shifts and changes in how people engaged with me, found me, made inquiries to work with me, and then did eventually work with me. So many people from that moment on said, when I found your website, I just felt so cared for. I felt so seen, because I also changed my copy a lot as well. I softened the language. I started to use more conversational style, more me words, rather than the straight corporate professional type speak that I thought people wanted to see and needed to see to take me seriously as a coach. And really, the big lesson in there was I wasn't taking myself seriously. I wasn't owning who I truly was. I didn't believe in myself enough that I was enough as I was, and that by putting my true and real self out there, that I would then attract the right people towards me. And as soon as I began to do that, my business began to take off. I started to receive more and more inquiries to coach and work with me. And that was when things really, truly began to fire up in my coaching business, and in particular back in those days and at that stage where I was exclusively working with people one-on-one. So, Catherine, that is the best, most prominent and most memorable piece of advice from a friend that I've ever been given in my coaching career. And that was to own who I am, embrace who I am, and put myself out there as I am, believing that that is enough. And I really hope that for you and for everyone listening as well, that you can save yourself a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of heartache, that if you are in any way trying to emulate someone else or believe that you have to be a certain way to have a successful coaching business, that you can learn from my story and my advice to know that we don't want you in any other way than who you fully, authentically, and genuinely are. And I am so happy to see that this seems to be the case now for so many more coaches and online business owners, which is so wonderful. You know, I'm seeing more coaches that have photo shoots where they don't have any professional hair and makeup at all, and others that absolutely do that and get something very polished and glamorous, and every version in between. Copy on websites that's very direct and kick-ass and in your face, right through to very soft and gentle and loving and caring and everything in between. Brands that are bright and colorful and zany and even outrageous, through to ones that are very neutral and soft and warm, and again, everything in between. Being a coach and being an online business owner is one of the greatest journeys of development in life that you'll ever go on, let alone in business. And believe me when I tell you that if you choose to do that in any other way other than as your full and wholehearted self, at some point in time, you will have an experience like I did where either things will not launch and go well, or you'll get tired and exhausted from the masks that you're wearing, or you'll burn out, or many, many other things that may come into your field and happen. And so we circle back again to just the importance of being you, doing you, and knowing that when you do that, not only will you attract the right people towards you, but you likely will inspire so many other people, not just other coaches, but other people even just in your everyday life, to do and be exactly the same. Thank you so much for being here with me on the Coach's Couch. I have loved this question, Catherine. Thank you. And I hope everyone that there is a little part of my journey, or maybe even a big part of my journey, that you find helpful. with your own. Thank you so much for being here with us. I hope you'll join me on the couch or for an inspirational interview or a beautiful you success story here on Inspired Coach sometime in the future.